Hello folks, welcome to Rational Science, the only site on the internet that does physics. Everybody else does particles, or they move concepts around. Anyways, we have an exciting day today. We're going to find out what a sphere is. And yeah, no flatlanders need to listen to this lecture. Okay, I'm going to start with a little bit of news that I heard the other day, in fact today, and I relate it to extinction, okay, which is a subject that we also touch on this site, okay, and it's about this fellow. See if I can get him up here. His name is Ed Snowden, okay, and this gentleman now sold what is known as a non-fungible token, NFT, for $5 million, okay? So what is a non-fungible token? It is a unit of data stored on a blockchain that certifies digital asset to be unique and therefore not interchangeable. NFTs can be used to represent items such as photos, videos, audio, and other types of digital files. While copies of these digital items are available for anyone to obtain, NFTs are tracked on blockchains to provide the owner with a proof of ownership that is separate from copyright. In 2021, there has been increased interest in using NFTs. Blockchains like Ethereum, Flow, Tezos have their own standards when it comes to supporting NFTs, but each works to ensure that the digital item represented is authentically one of a kind. NFTs are now being used to commodify digital assets in art, music, etc., and popular entertainment. The NFT market value tripled in 2020, reaching more than $250 million. The rise of NFT transaction has also led to increased environmental criticism. The carbon emissions produced by the energy needed to maintain these blockchains has forced some in the NFT market to rethink their carbon footprint. What is this fungible? Well, it's mutually interchangeable. And in the case of this one here, the one Snowden is talking about, it's not interchangeable. They paid $5 million for it. So this is the new world that we have. We no longer trade goods. Now and we don't even trade like for services, muscle services, like cutting the lawn or a barber barbering your hair or whatever, hairdresser. Now it's all this abstraction. We're moving into a world of abstraction everywhere. Internet workers, scammers. We got all kinds of stuff out there. Incredible. So, if you're thinking about living a long time, get ready, You might be surprised that we're all going down the drain very, very fast, okay? So don't make plans for the future, okay? Just in case. Anyways, who is this fellow Ed Snowden? Well, I wrote an article on Quora. You can find it there on good old Ed Snowden. Really, I didn't write it on him. I wrote it on his pal Assange. Okay, Julian Assange is probably better known or just as well known as Ed Snowden, right? And so this is his lady, I guess his wife. And this is what they do these days. Again, a lot of internet stuff. They say, oh, my husband's famous. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to take off my clothes and get a lot of shots, put them on the internet, And of course, you can have maybe book writing and some other stuff accompany this. And they had a baby in December, okay? I guess she flew to Russia, and they had their good night over there. And on the right-hand side, you see Mr. Assange, another U.S. intelligence asset. And that's, I think, 2016 to 2017. They were on the streets of London. They were walking the streets of London. They had two kids at the embassy. That could have happened in the embassy, but certainly that's not them in the embassy right there. They're on the streets. And this contrasts a little bit with this. This is how Assange was in 2012. He was cooped up in the Ecuadorian embassy with all the bobbies around him up there in London, right? And so what a change. Here's the bobbies. They're trying to get him out of there. They said, that they also eavesdropped in different ways inside the embassy. And here's this guy, there on the lower right, close to the center now, and he's walking the streets of London. I mean, how bad can the MI5s and MI6 be that they don't realize this guy's walking the streets of London? Yeah, you got to be quite dummy to believe that Assange and Snowden are anything but U.S. intelligence assets. In fact, in the case of Snowden, he went to China. He was in Hong Kong. And, when I came to the Cubans and to the Russians, not so much to the Russians, I went through Cuba, but they accepted, they opened, they rolled out the red carpet for me, Snowden goes to China. You would think the Chinese would say, hey, what a chance. We got this guy Snowden. He left the United States. We can recruit him as an asset. They gave him 3 days, 72 hours to leave China. They didn't buy it. And so the guy goes out and he's going to go to South America, and he's going through Moscow. And it turns out he goes to Moscow. He's going to go to South America or some country down there. And it turns out the United States, goes through the motions of notifying any country that receives Snowden that they would be in trouble. And so no one accepts Snowden, gives him asylum, and he ends up staying in Russia. Very good, very well planned. And did Russia come out? Well, no. Russia, I'm sure Mr. Putin knows that Snowden is a U.S. spy, but he's not there to spy on Russia. He's there to spy on the American public. That's his job. He's there to disinform the American public. He's there to lead them by the nose. Okay? And this is the world we live in today. How long such a thing can last, I cannot imagine, when these are the things that governments have to do. So this is in the background as well, right? So let's get on with some of the issues related to extinction. And here you have a couple questions that people asked. Okay, so let's go over some of those. Someone says USD collapsing doesn't mean Bitcoin collapse at the same time. Lead and hemp can be money too. You are going to have a hard time getting rid of all the money. These people don't understand. They're so into money, into investment and trade and all that stuff. You can't get their minds off of that. They don't think that Bitcoin is money. Yeah, all things are money. Anything you can exchange, whether you barter or just use as currency, all of it is money. Okay? So to say that Bitcoin is not going to fall when the dollars in the world and the euros in the world are no longer, have no value. It's just incredible. It just shows how brainwashed people really are. You can't get them out of that mode. I can't even talk to a lot of these people because they just close their ears and all they can understand is business and, and investment and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Bitcoin is money. And if there are no dollars out there, then you can't have a world of just Bitcoin. Okay, because at some point you're going to have to trade them for example, dollars or euros or gold or something else that has value that you can exchange out there for, among other things, food, And so to say that you get a lot of Bitcoins in your pocket, which is just this abstraction that's floating out there, without any other money on the planet, I don't think so. But yeah, this is what these people believe. You can't even talk to them. Another fellow says, what is it? The pandemic and lockdowns are to mask the death of fractional reserve banking. The lockdowns are there to control spending in the economy and stabilize feed prices until they can get us all on board with another bullshit criminal scheme. Real money cannot die. It's called barter. Their house of cards is coming down. All these people think of this conspiracy, that the rich somehow are compelling everybody to go into this uh, chicken coop, the poor people, just putting them there and control them. When the shit hits the fan and the world economy finally collapses, totally collapses, disintegrates so that nobody accepts money anymore and there is no more money, well, the rich have lost all their power. What are they gonna do to keep their gangs? The people who their enforcers. What are they gonna pay them with? Money. Again, and the people who are the enforcers, they have no reason to have any loyalty to the boss anymore. And probably the first guy to go will be the rich guy. He's probably old. He's relying on all these young guys to protect him. And it turns out they say, hey, we don't need you, old man. So they might even eat him for all we know, just put him on the barbecue. Yeah. No, when money collapses, there will be no loyalties. We're back to the Stone Age, where in the Stone Age we had no money. There was no such thing as trade. And we lived without trade for 90% of our existence, human existence. So no, this notion that the world collapses, but you're still going to do your thing out there with money, or trade, or barter. No. In the asphalt jungle, without money, no one trusts anybody, and there is no trade because the only thing of value is food. And city folk don't seem to understand that, or they never thought about this, at all. And one fellow says, here along that same line, he says, food is money. No, food is not money. Food is money today, under our system today. So anything is money today. Even prostitution is money. You give the girl for some money or whatever. Everything is money today. But the day that money collapses, that money is no more, that trade is no more, whatever food you have, you will not give away. If anything, you'll go out there and steal whatever someone else has. But you will not give the little food that you have away. To think that you're going to be bartering bananas for apples just shows the mentality of some people. That's all it shows. It shows how ignorant these people are. And these are city folk that think they're smart, Yeah, incredible. Another fellow says, what? Money. Ending makes just as much sense as everyone forgetting to eat. You need to explain marketing with rational science to explain your hypothesis properly. Okay? Well, people don't understand that when money disappears completely, it's the end of food. And it's so hard to get that across to people today because we take food for granted. And yet, last year, I don't know if your memory reaches that far, what was it, April or May, they started rationing a lot of stuff, among them toilet paper. And I don't know if people remember that at all, but you could go almost anywhere. Here in Germany, they ration food items, and people could not take more than 1 or 2 packets of different items from the shelves. Suddenly, overnight, here in a first world country, and you say, how can this happen here in Europe? Are we back to the days of the Weimar Republic where, they were going with their cartwheels full of money to buy a loaf of bread and scarcity and all that stuff, soup kitchens? Are we going back to that? And yeah, we could go overnight, just like it happened last year. People don't realize how quickly things can deteriorate. Suddenly, you go to the supermarket and they don't allow you to take more than 1 item, 2 items or whatever. They put some rationing system in place, or worse, they might say, we can't sell you this, or we don't have any of this because we didn't receive any deliveries. A lot of stuff can happen, and that can happen overnight. So, when people don't understand it, it's just unbelievable. For me, it's just incredible. And before that, you need to explain the mechanism of how past extinctions, especially mass extinctions, happened. Extinction 101. See, people want to talk about man. Everybody's an expert on man. You know, we all know man like the palm of our hands. And what do they say? They always argue the same thing. They know how man is not going to die. And it's not going to die. Man's not going to disappear the way you say, Bill. Okay? And so what do you propose instead? And you'll never see or hear a proposal. You'll never hear them say, this is how man will disappear. And so you say, well, is it guaranteed? Is your mechanism, the one that you're proposing for man's extinction, assuming you believe that man's going to become extinct, right? That's the first question. But assuming you do believe that man's going to become extinct in the future, by what mechanism that man cannot elude? That's the question. Because if man can elude it, you don't have a foolproof system. Means that, you know, I can have an antidote to your argument because I can come up and say, but this. And you say, well, yeah, we know that it's not foolproof. Well, then you don't have a mechanism. See, the food mechanism is a foolproof mechanism. If food disappears, man disappears. That part hopefully is undebatable, and you'd be surprised. People say, no, even if food disappears, man will be around. They'll say this, okay? So you got a lot of people who haven't even gotten past that point, you know? And so, yeah, if food disappears, I think humans will disappear. That's a foolproof mechanism. Now, whether you believe food will disappear, that's a separate issue. But if food disappears, if we make that assumption, well, hopefully you conclude that man will necessarily, invariably disappear. And sometimes it's very hard for people to even understand that much. It's incredible. Okay, so yeah, you got to do this. You got to do Extinction 101 before you do Extinction 102. What is Extinction 101? Well, it's a mass extinction. You have to explain how the animals in the past died, okay, how they disappeared. And, today we have catastrophic theories from the so-called paleontology establishment. Not one in the last 200 years has been able to explain background extinctions or mass extinctions. Neither one. We don't have a foolproof mechanism for extinctions. And not one of them suspects that man will become extinct. So obviously they don't understand anything about extinction, and that's the job of a paleontologist. He's a medical examiner. He's a detective, a guy who studies death. That's what paleontology does. That's his job. He's got to tell us how species in the past died. That's his number one job. All the other stuff that, scraping bones from the rock and assembling them, giving a fancy name and putting them in a museum, that's not paleontology. That's stamp collecting. Okay? Paleontology is one thing and one thing only, and that's explaining how the animals in the past died. That's what we have to explain. And if you can't explain that, you're not a paleontologist. Just that simple. And then, yeah, once you explain past extinctions, you can move on to man and say, well, how will man become extinct? And here are the problems. Some people don't even recognize that humans are animals. They think we're not. We poop, we eat, we sleep. We have sex, some of us. and they still say, well, yeah, but we're not animals. But that's what all animals do out there. How are we different than animals? And we are categorized under mammals, okay, because we have our babies, women do, right, through their uterus. We don't lay eggs, not outside at least, we lay them inside. And so people don't recognize that we're animal. We belong to the animal kingdom. We don't belong to the plant kingdom, and we don't belong to the rocks and mineral kingdom. We belong to the animal kingdom, and within that we belong to the mammals. And if mammals in the past have died, relatively recent past, and dinosaurs have died, and archosaurs have died, and mammal-like reptiles and amphibians, they've died in the past. These were all animals, right? different kinds of animals. Well, since we're animals, we're probably going to die as well, disappear as well. We're going to become extinct. And so to say that, oh no, we're the only exception in the animal kingdom. We don't become extinct. Well, you know, again, a lot of brainwashing there, a lot of wishful thinking. And then, yeah, extinction can happen if food disappears. If, that's a big if, right? If food disappears, man will die. If we have nothing to eat, how long can you live without eating? I mean, you can live without breathing for a few seconds, maybe minutes. You can live without water, maybe a few days, right? But without food, you know, you can't live for a long time, okay? Certainly not, I don't think you can live over 2 months. Except an Indian guy who says he's been without eating for 45 years. And I always say with my son, yeah, old man, I know how it feels. You know, I haven't eaten since this morning. It's like I haven't eaten in 45 years too. Anyways, food chain collapse, it's a selective mechanism. Some animals die and some animals don't. So now we have a clue there that maybe that created the extinction of the dinosaurs and left the mammals alive. And they left a bunch of fish in the seas alive, whereas the reptiles, the mosasaurs and so on, they vanished. And in the air, you know, the pterodactyls, they were flying around, they disappeared. The flying reptiles, and what remained were birds. So it's a selective mechanism, the food chain, okay? And that little square, little rectangle there that I underlined there, food disappears if money disappears. Lots of people don't understand that. And people say, well, Bill, tell us how money is going to disappear. Well, we can't get that far because we're stuck on that other one. A lot of people still don't believe that if money disappears, food disappears. They're still wondering about that one. Forget about, you know, money disappearing. Right now, they can't understand that if money disappears, food will disappear. And so we got to get to that step first. Okay, so yeah, I don't think it's worth even talking about how money will disappear yet, because there's too many people who don't believe that food disappears if money disappears. And I showed the chain of food the other day, the fact that all these connections only run because of money. And if you cut those chains of money, currency, anything, Bitcoin, if you cut that chain, you know, the system doesn't run anymore. No one produces food, no one distributes food, the supermarkets don't sell food, and you can have all the money you want in the bank. It's not going to help you at all because there won't be any food because no one will be producing it. Why? Because money has disappeared and they have no pecuniary incentive to produce or distribute food. So that is the bottom line. Okay, here's another issue. Said how the food chain of dinosaurs disappeared. What was the cause behind the disappearance of food of dinosaurs? Okay, that's an important question, so let's address that. I've addressed it in the past. I'll just go quickly through it. Okay, here it is. Here you can see the types of plants that were around in the Devonian all the way to Cenozoic. Okay, and what you see there is that the ferns dominated early on, then they were overtaken by the gymnosperms, and finally by the angiosperms, which is what rules the planet today. So the issue is that when a big family order of plants disappears, the animals that forged a relationship with those plants and carved niches in different types of plants of those days, when those plants disappear, the animal will disappear as well. It's just that simple. It's a relatively gradual process, which then comes to, you know, an abrupt stop right at the end. But yeah, that is the mechanism. And here's another graph that I like to show. Okay, it's known as the Cretaceous Terrestrial Revolution. And you can see here's the blueprint, or here's the pattern that shows how dinosaurs disappeared. Okay, here it is. Okay, you can see the red there, those are the angiosperms. And we're talking about number of species, not quantities. But you can imagine that if there were more species of angiosperms, there were also more quantities of it in covering the planet and taking over the land. They were displacing the cycads, the ferns as well. There was a fern spike towards the end, but they were replacing the cycads, the conifers, the ginkgos. Okay, there's only one strand of ginkgo today. Okay, and so you can see what happened from about the middle, maybe a little earlier, of the Cretaceous. The angiosperms started muscling in on all the other plants, and they eventually covered the land. Today, most of our planet only has angiosperms. Okay, we have conifers, but no mammal really eats conifers, and we don't eat ferns. Okay, maybe there's one or two exceptions out there. You got to look through it. Someone who says, "Oh, this animal eats this part of the fern over here, like something special." And mammals don't eat ferns. Mammals don't eat conifers. So guess what happens when angiosperms disappear? And it turns out we don't eat all angiosperms. Like humans, we don't eat grass. And some of the grasses out there are weeds. We don't eat a lot of those things, and those are angiosperms. They're flowering plants. We don't eat a lot of those. We eat special types of angiosperms, And so when those plants disappear, we disappear. And that's essentially what happened to the animals in the past. Their food sources, they were these big jungles originally, big forests, and they became shrinking islands, what I call my shrinking island process, where the food sources become smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually the animals can't find enough to eat, and they begin to have problems, and their numbers begin to decrease. Okay? So it has to do with plants disappearing. And this is the mechanism. I call it the overturning of the population pyramid of plants. And you'll see two graphs here, or two images here. One has to do with the overturning of the animal kingdom, the other one with the plant kingdom. Okay, here it is. Okay, the one on the top is the animal kingdom, and you can see what happens. We have 10-to-1 ratio between trophic levels. There's about 10 times as much primary production as there are herbivores. And there's about 10 times as many herbivores as there are predators. Okay, what happens towards the end is that overturns. Why? Because as you can see, what happens is what disappears there is the greenery, the primary production. And what happens to the greenery, to the primary production, is that their population pyramid overturns. Okay? And you have with that a loss of genetic diversity. You see a lot of plants today, I mentioned this in the past, where you find peaches. I grow different kinds of plants and fruits out there. You got a little plot of land, and I do it just for investigation, for research. And I have this beautiful peach tree, and last year I had five Siamese twins among the peaches. They come out like two, blended by the belly. So you have a double peach come out. And I had 5 of those on my tree. And it turns out when you look at the history of peaches, a few thousand years ago, they were like little berries. And because of human artificial selection, we made them grow over time. We selected and planted what we really wanted, and the peaches grew over time. Today we have these, they're not berries anymore. They look more like apples, apple size, pear size. But the peaches have lost their genetic diversity. And so now you can see why we're having Siamese twins come out of the trees. And it's not only the peaches. I mean, if you look on the internet, just look up images for Siamese fruits and veggies. and you'll find out which ones are at the end of the line, because a lot of them are coming out as Siamese twins, meaning from my theory that they lost their genetic diversity. And if you add to that the fact that a lot of them are coming out without seed. We have seedless grapes, seedless watermelons, or the seeds are becoming smaller, and we have seedless limes and so on. A lot of these trees are grown vegetatively. They go out there and they pull out a little branch and they stick it in the ground, they grow another tree, and so it's all cloning. And that's not good for humanity, because we don't have the plants growing normally the way they should, and all we're doing is extending their life expectancy. A lot of these plants should have gone sour a long time ago, and we're keeping them alive by replanting them over and over. Okay, anyways, here's another issue. Fellow raises, guess you must hate women. He says, lack of patriarchy, not cities, is the common factor, Bill. Patriarchal societies still have kids. Aha. He thinks it's an issue of this thing we had in the past where men dominated, and now women are coming up to speed and they're more or less, becoming our equals. And so, I have a couple of arguments. One is that bacteria growing on a piece of bread, they're not organized patriarchally. And that's why you have to do Extinction 101 before you do Extinction 102. You got to look at why animals and why plants disappeared in the past. And also why, they went through this population curve, okay? And so, no, it's guaranteed all species will eventually get to their curve, their S curve. And the S curve, as I explained in a couple videos ago, ends up in extinction, always. It's not an S curve like, it stops there. They should continue with the S curve, and shows that it goes all the way to zero. And 10 families patriarchal nuclear within a sea of bachelors is not equal to reproduction. Today we have a world of bachelors, and more people are not getting married. There are no long-term relationships. And so when you have whatever group is still out there that still has, follows the traditions, me among them, where you get married, you have kids and so on, and you live happily ever after, that's going away very fast. And today we have a world of bachelors, essentially. If there is reproduction, it's very little per couple. And then they divorce, they each get new partners, then most of them don't want to have kids, and so on and so forth. That's why we're not having children. But we're not having children in that scenario because we moved to the cities. The key issue is that we went from the country to the cities. And when you have high density areas, you get into density dependent birth rates. And so you got to look up these terms and find out what they mean, and why it's deterministic, not free will. Women don't have the free will to have babies. People say, you're crazy, Bill. My wife can have a baby whenever she wants. Well, why doesn't she? Why doesn't she have a baby? With you, I mean, maybe with her neighbor, but no, we're not having babies collectively. That's the issue. You can't go and say, well, my wife can have a baby whenever she wants. Well, yeah, maybe she can, but she doesn't. When you take many families, many couples together, most of them will not have babies. Okay, that's the issue. And if they do have babies, they won't have many. They won't have 10 kids like we used to have in the 19th century. Half of them died, but it didn't matter. You still had 5. Today, it's not even close. Okay? So, no, it's density-dependent birth rate. And here you see a little image of that. I showed it in the past, but let me show it one more time so you know what I'm talking about. Here it is. Okay, there you have a couple of fruits. Okay, this has nothing to do with patriarchy. Okay, what you have there is I call it the water gets you drunk theory. People say, well, water with whiskey gets you drunk, water with beer gets you drunk, water with wine gets you drunk, so water's the common factor, right? Well, that's more or less what this fellow, the Aaron, his reasoning. No, it's density-dependent birth rates, and there you see it. When the bacteria or the fungus or whatever, attacks a fruit or a veggie or whatever, they grow at first exponentially. If we could count each unit in there, each individual, you would see that it's growing exponentially. But then after a while, they've eaten the fruit and now they've got this density dependence. They can't continue expanding exponentially, and that's when the curve turns. Okay? So, and it's got nothing to do with patriarchy. Yeah, maybe they changed their habits, their culture. That could be. But why did they change their culture? Because of density dependence. Okay, another question here, another comment. Lots of comments on this. That's why I'm covering that, because there are lots of issues there. Could the lack of biodiversity in humans be due to a rather recent bottleneck in population? Well, again, all these are theories. Okay, keep that in mind. All these are theories. You can believe whichever theory you want. You just got to look at different theories and make up your own mind. I mean, if people are interested in the subject, they'll do research and they'll find theories out there. And some you accept, some you reject, depending on your upbringing, your training, whatever. Many mammals that have been around for a while and have inbred to exhaustion have lost their genetic diversity. So it's not that there was a recent bottleneck in human population or anything like that. It's that we're not the only animal that is approaching density-dependent mode. Okay? There's other animals. You look at the lions. About 50 years ago, there were 150,000 lions estimated, right, in Africa, and today's only about 35,000 and dropping. Even with conservationist measures. And again, when population drops so drastically, you get also into the issue of genetic diversity. You lose genetic diversity because the few that remain, they're more or less cousins and part of maybe the same family, the same great-grandfathers, the same founders effect. So, what happens is when you reduce the population, you have less genetic diversity, especially if these animals have been around for a long time. Okay? And so, lions have lost their genetic diversity, not to mention the cheetahs. Cheetahs have no genetic diversity, probably the animal on Earth that has the least amount of genetic diversity, or one of the ones. Maybe the Komodo dragon is around there as well. Okay, and that's why you got to do Extinction 101 before 102. You got to talk about animals before you talk about this animal called man. Okay, another comment issue says, in such scenario, I think North Korea would do really well because they have plenty of autonomy, grow a lot of their own food, everything is state-owned, everyone has to do military conscription, etc. North Korea would actually last really well in a world where the global economy plummets. People are so mistaken. They're so mistaken. I've been to Cuba and several times. And, like Cuba, like North Korea, it's a capitalist country inside Cuba to a great extent. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a saying, or there was a saying in Cuba when Castro was around, and it's like, Fidel Castro will not intervene in your daily activities if you don't intervene in politics. Each one has his own realm. And so, they say, well, Cuba is all controlled everywhere, which it is, but the black market is booming. It's always been booming, all the way to 1959. People trade in secret, and they some not so secret. It's like an open secret. Everybody knows that everybody trades, And one time I was driving down the highway and with a friend, Cuban friend, and the cops had stopped a an individual who was coming from the country to the city. In the city, there's a lot of stuff that's missing. You don't have a lot of food, especially meat. There's almost no meat in the cities, in Havana, old Havana, and so on. And in the country, they live like kings in comparison because you grow your own chickens, you grow your own pigs, whatever, and you can slaughter one of them without anyone knowing, and having a feast. And so what a lot of the country folk do to get some stuff from the city, they bring in their little piglets and chickens and so on, and they bring them, to the city. But then you have the cops, and the cops, they patrol the highway. Okay, highway patrol, Broderick Crawford, and so they stopped this man, and he had some pigs in his truck, and the cops saw it there, and what the guy did was simply bribe the cops, and everybody went on their merry way. The cops went one way, and this fellow came the other way, and he just brought his stuff to the city. So yeah, there's a black market in Cuba. I've seen people who work in restaurants take stuff home. So to say that Cuba and North Korea and all these countries that are communist are going to be different, no. They have to have commerce with the West, and there you see it. North Korea has commerce with and depends heavily on China. And North Korea wants U.S. economic sanctions lifted. Why? If they don't do any commerce, why would they be worried about U.S. lifting sanctions? Commercial sanctions. Well, because it's affecting them because they need goods in the country, and the only way they can get them is by trade. Right now they're trading through China, which is like a little channel, a little tunnel through which, that's their umbilical cord that keeps the country running to a great extent because they don't produce enough stuff because they're not efficient. And and so North Korea will not survive if the rest of the world collapses. Neither will Cuba because they need other countries. In fact, let me tell you another anecdote. When I was in Cuba, I asked my handlers over there, and I said, Cuba runs quite inefficiently. And they said, yeah, we know. Oh, you know? Yeah, we know. Well, why don't you run it efficiently or more efficiently than what you have today? And they said, well, in order to do so, we would have to give incentives to people, monetary incentives. I said, okay. And they said, well, if we give monetary incentives to people, it'll destroy morale. Revolutionary morale. And it would bring out the worst in man. And so that was their answer. So what they do is they rely on the black market and just don't get caught and you'll do okay. Nobody will do anything to you. Okay, another comment here. Lots of them, like I said. Fellow says there are very many marriages that the partnership has separate bank accounts. Because I said that's the definition of marriage, one bank account. If you have two bank accounts, you're not married. Because what? You're ready to run. In partner we trust? I guess not, right? Especially in this day and age, especially in the cities. No one trusts anyone, especially their partner. They've heard so many stories, so they don't even get married. And a lot of women don't want to get pregnant or have children because of all the little stories that they hear out there, all these tales. So yeah, this fellow who says many marriages that the partnership has separate bank accounts, well, they don't meet the definition, so they're not married. That's the answer to that. Okay? Very simple. Yeah, you got to meet the definition. Definition is that you need to have one bank account and not two. Okay, another fellow raises a little more important issue. He says the following. He says, once more, Bill is in conflict with his own beliefs, which he is calling theories. He claims to make no predictions, but he is claiming again and again, we are the last generation on Earth. Yes, I do claim that. And this claim is a prediction. No, it's not a prediction. See, when you do a prediction, you got to set a date and time. See, I can make a prediction right now and say there will be an eclipse, guaranteed. And you say, I bet you $1 million that there won't be an eclipse. And as long as we don't put a date, you won't win the bet. Okay, I got to put a date and time. I got to say there's going to be an eclipse tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Then you have something to verify. But otherwise, if I say there won't be any eclipse or there will be an eclipse, and I don't put a date and time, when it's going to happen, well, is that a prediction? So we got to separate the issue here. The issue is that I'm not making any prediction. It has nothing at all to do with prediction. You're focusing on the wrong aspect. The correct context here is that we're talking about explanation of a mechanism. How an extinction happens, especially a mass extinction in the case of man. How does a mass extinction happen? And what we're doing is extrapolating what happened to all the other animals in the past that became extinct to the future, to us humans, and we're saying we cannot avoid that same mechanism. If food disappears, humans will die no matter what, invariably. And so the issue here is not that it's a prediction in the sense that we're going to put a date and time and say, oh, on the 1st of May of, the year 2026, we're all going to die, or the last man is going to die. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that we cannot avoid the mechanism that killed the animals in the past in a mass extinction or in mass extinctions. We cannot avoid that same mechanism. Therefore, we will die. Okay, because the mechanism is unavoidable. That's why it's not a prediction in the traditional sense of saying, give me a date and time. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with an unavoidable mechanism. And I'm not sure if I got through to you, but that's what it is, and people don't understand that. The context is important here to understand what the word prediction means. We're not making any prediction. We're explaining a mechanism saying that we cannot avoid what happened to the other animals. Okay. And the animals in the past died because food disappeared, and we cannot avoid becoming extinct if food disappears. And what we're saying is food will disappear because that is the mechanism Mother Nature uses to get rid of species, even if they're the apex predators like we are. So yeah, we cannot avoid extinction. And we will, obviously, become extinct. I'd say quite soon. Whatever soon means to you. You have to make up your own time frame, depending on your education, on your research, on your upbringing. But yeah, we were going to die. And here you can see what's happened. For 90% maybe or more of human lifetime, we were hunter-gatherers. We just killed an animal and lived another day. That was it. And then, anyway, the numbers are not important here, but they're just the magnitudes are important. The fact that you can see what's happening to the numbers here. About 10,000 years ago, we went into farming. And then 300 years ago or so, we went into manufacturing. That was the mode of production, primary mode of production. We also had different types of families in these eras. We had in the hunter-gathering, we had group sex. Farming, we had patriarchal societies. Manufacturing was mom and pop, the nuclear family. And today in the service economy, we have the bachelor. Okay, we're moving into the bachelor mode. And we went, in fact, there's two categories there. As you can see, I've updated that graph. We used to have labor-intensive services, like, things that you did with your hands. And today we have essentially self-service. In other words, internet jobs. Everybody is an entrepreneur, all on his own. Okay, and so yeah, and I say that that is essentially unemployment. That's what that kind of work is. It's unemployment because we're not producing anything anymore, and it's the goods that make up the wealth of the planet. And when God looks from up there, Mother Nature, the devil, oh, the devil's down there, I think, and they look at our planet, they only see what's real, what's there, the objects, the things we made. They don't see the promises, insurance, banking. They don't see any of that. Bitcoin. They don't see any of that. That's all floating in the air. There's none of that. That's just faith. That's all that is, faith. So we have an economy today built on faith. And when, we in God we trust, we don't trust anymore in God, well, then faith is gone. Okay, so that's the issue there. Money is going to be the killer. And that's why I always keep saying you got to do Extinction 101 before you do Extinction 102. Okay, another issue that was raised, not necessarily related to extinction, could be, depending on how you look at it, okay? But this fellow says, let me get this thing in here. Says, it is absolutely funny to know that Bill is an ex-communist who fought for decades for a society which can finish the rule of big money and the use of money in general. Well, no, that's not really what communism was about. Communism, actually better known as the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is what we have, if anything, on Earth today. We don't have communism at all on Earth today. The so-called communist countries, they're in the phase known as dictatorship of the proletariat, okay, where the workers take over the government, supposedly, okay, at least ideally, and they run the country in opposition to what happened before, which was the rich people run the country. And that's not true. There's still rich people in Cuba and in North Korea and so on that run the country. That's the reality of it. Okay, some people have benefits, and I noticed this when I was in Cuba. Okay, you have all these rich people running the country, or people who have access to things like Fidel Castro. When I was down there, he had access to a couple of mansions. He lived well. He had several cars. He had this group that protected him and went with him everywhere. So he's got this little empire where he runs the country. He's the big macho guy there, and he eats well. He ate meat whenever he wanted. The average Cuban does not. Okay, and that is important to understand. Let me tell you why. Because let me get this out of here for a second. Think about it. I was a communist and I was an atheist. So what do atheists believe in? Well, atheists believe that your soul does not exist, that there is no such thing as a soul. And so when you die, there is no soul that goes to heaven and lives forever. Okay? And so if your soul is not there, because there's no such thing as soul or conscience or mind that leaves the body and goes to heaven and lives forever, then this is the only life you get to live. When you die, that's it. Your atoms get absorbed by the land and then become part of plants, and some animal eats it, and now they've got the atoms that belong to you. That's more or less, we probably have dinosaur atoms in our bodies today. Okay? Dinosaurs died, became part of the land, the plant grows, has some of those atoms, and we eat the plant, and we have now a little bit of dinosaur in us. One atom that belonged to some animal in the past. So there's only one life we get to live. And so now this is the issue, one of the issues that triggered in me, Here you have Fidel and all these communists, and they say, oh, we have to make the revolution. Okay, for what? Well, we have to make the revolution so that our children, our great-grandchildren, all these people will finally be able to live in a society, in an egalitarian society. Well, I live today. I don't even know if I'll get to see my great-grandchildren. And so this is the only life I get. I'm not going to go to heaven because I'm an atheist, right? And so this is the only life I get to live. And you're saying, Bill, you got to sacrifice yourself for the revolution. I see. I have to sacrifice myself for the revolution. Fidel lives in a mansion, and I got to do it because temporarily, yeah, someone's got to be the boss. There's got to be a dictatorship of the proletarians up there, you know, few people who take decisions for the rest of the country. And, you know, we have to respect that because that's the way it is until everybody is equal on planet Earth, which will be 3 or 4 generations down the road, if we're lucky, right? Something's wrong with that because it means I'm sacrificing my life. You're saying, Bill, you got to be a slave for the rest of your life and build a pyramid for the Pharaoh so that eventually we can all be kings. That's essentially what the message is of communism, of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Right now we have dictatorship. I don't know about communism, which is this egalitarian society where, all, like Lincoln said, you know, all men are created equal. He was a communist, obviously. No, Mr. Lincoln. And Secretary of War Edwin Stanton showed him that he was wrong, had him murdered. So, yeah, no, communism has no future. And because there is no such thing as communism except as an ideal. Right now, all we have, the best we have is dictatorship of the proletariat. And within those dictatorship of the proletariats, the powers that be, they look the other way and let you do your black market. Just don't get caught, okay? Because it's illegal to do black marketing, which is what everybody does and has to do if they want to survive one more day and have a more or less decent life. So that's the way it really works. Okay, and this other fellow says something along the same lines. Says, imagine how Intel felt when they realized you plagiarized their Pentium chip and dropped it off in Cuba. The good news, the FBI caught your ass. Well, this poor fellow, he doesn't know the story. Doesn't know the story at all. No, the FBI did not catch my ass. Okay, not at all. You got to read the story or watch the movie or whatever. No, the FBI worked with me. They worked with me for a couple of years. And the issue was that they went in there and they asked me to take material out of Intel Corporation, specifically a run card known as the 6295. It's a recipe, a step-by-step instructions on how to build a specific device. And, you know, it's a little card, an elongated card. And they asked me to pull that out of Intel and give it to them, which I did. And because they needed to give it to the Cubans to make them believe that everything was normal. Their counter-espionage project or what they were doing, their work, overruled the giving of Intel technology. And all they had to make sure is that the technology was not critical. And what I did, not only did I film them, and I showed that the other day, where, in fact, I think I have that here. Here's the oven cam, okay, which I put in my oven, okay. And then you see this agent, FBI agent, he's paying me, okay. And there's the oven cam, you'll see it in a second there, okay. That's how I put it in my oven. And whenever he would come in and pay me, well, he was filmed. He was on candid camera. But that's not the only thing I did. See, when I gave him the 6295 run card, I gave him the card, and he looked at it, and he said, okay, this is good. I think we can use this. And we talked a little. He went to the bathroom, and what he didn't know is that I switched run cards on him. I had 2 run cards. And so I switched the run cards on him and kept the one with his fingerprints. And so they knew that eventually, you know, years later, they knew about it when I went to trial. And not only did I have them filmed, I had their fingerprints. I had a couple money orders, which I still have, in which I also had their fingerprints here, okay? And all that, you know, was documented. And I had a handwriting expert to show that this was a specific FBI agent. And so I had him by the balls. that's why they gave me a lenient service sentence, because the prosecutor was between the sword and the wall. On the one hand, they had Intel who really wanted to get at me, but the prosecutor wanted to get me without getting the FBI agents in prison. That was the issue. And if they did get them in there, either we were all absolved or we were all going to prison. And so this was the issue. The other issue was that, in Argentina, I had the CIA come over and they interviewed me, etc. But before that happened, I was arrested first by the Argentine, really the Secret Service. Okay, and I was kept in a cell for several days until they questioned me. And one of the things they talked about, or they asked me about, was Iran. You say, well, why did they ask you about Iran? What does that have to do with Intel and AMD and all that stuff? Well, at the time, it still had nothing to do with them. The reason they arrested me was that it turns out that there was a bombing of the Israel embassy in Argentina. Lots of people were killed, like 80 or 90. And then they had the AMIA, the Mutual Association of Israelites also, and that was bombed as well. And a lot of people died there as well. And so the CIA was in Argentina, and the FBI as well. They were in Argentina working with the CIDE, which is the Argentine Secret Service, Intelligence Service. Intelligence. I'm not sure how much intelligence they had. They were working together, and they were trying to get evidence against Iran. And here they see this guy walking with a camera, blonde guy, walking with a camera, walking into the Iranian embassy. And I was going in there for something totally different. I was not even aware that the Argentine intelligence was working with the CIA in investigating Iran. I had no idea. And so they kept their cameras, everything for sure, focused on the Iranian embassy, major avenue, Libertadores. And I go in there, and they started following me, and they arrested me. They arrested me, and they asked me a bunch of questions about Iran. Okay, so it turns out that meanwhile the FBI wanted to get me, wanted to talk to me, but they didn't want to talk to me in the United States because they had warned me. Listen to this. This is what the FBI does. They warned me that there was a case being raised by Intel in California, and that the prosecutors were investigating that. They were going to bring a case against me, a criminal case against me. So they said, don't come to the States because more than likely you're going to be arrested. We're warning you. And I said, okay, so where do you want to talk to me? Here in Argentina? I said, no, why don't we meet in Mexico? Okay, so we made a date, we made an appointment to meet in Mexico City. They went to Mexico City, and I came to Arizona, to Sky Harbor in Phoenix. So I went to the United States directly. I didn't go to Mexico. And that pissed them off because, they said, you came directly. And I was in the United States, and I said, well, this is going to blow over. It's either going to, no one's going to do anything about it, or a lot of us are going to be in trouble. And everybody knew that. And so the prosecutor had no choice but to bring the case against me because Intel was insisting. So they did bring me to court. And the prosecutor knew very well that the FBI would be involved as well because of all the evidence I had against them. So they were in deep trouble. And so that's why we had to reach a negotiated agreement where we sat down and, exchanged ideas. And the big idea was that were going to go after my wife. And so that was the issue. The issue was that they said, look, we go after your wife, and you take your chances there, and we take our chances with our people here. And so we decided to plea bargain instead. That's the way law works. So no, the FBI never caught me. I turned myself in fact, twice to the FBI. And when I did, three times to the FBI, I turned myself in after running out there. And when I turned myself in, they still were in trouble. And so we had to reach an agreement. There was no other way of doing this. Okay, let's get on with the subject matter of today, which is a sphere. Do we know what a sphere is? Yeah, let's find out what a sphere is. And let me start with this fellow. And his name is Euclid. We always go to Euclid. Why? Because he was the guy who formalized all this stuff. He was a Greek guy, a Greek citizen. He lived really in Alexandria, Egypt. That's where he did his work. But he did go to Aristotle's school, okay, in Athens, the Lyceum, and again in Athens, and that's where he got his education. Then he went to Alexandria, and he wrote this book, kind of condensed all the knowledge of the Greeks regarding geometry in those days. And he came up with these definitions, which again, they're not really his, because you'll see that in Aristotle's book on physics, he has that same exact definition, that which has no part for the point. You'll see it if you look up, I think it's chapter 6 of physics, and you'll find that same definition. Okay, I don't remember the chapter now, but I can look it up. Anyways, that which has no part was around. That was the notion that the Greeks had, meaning it has no dimensions, it has no size, no volume, no anything. That's what a point is. That's how they defined it. And what is a line? Well, a line is breadthless length. And again, what is it? What is a line made of? Made of points. What were the points? Zero dimensional, nothing there, no dimension, no size, no anything. And so a straight line, the fourth definition there, is a line which lies evenly with the points on itself. A line is made of points. It's regarded to be one-dimensional today. He defined it as a bunch of points, which again, he was referring to locations. So a line is a bunch of locations, meaning an itinerary, and there you have what a point is and what a line is. Nothing. There's no such thing as a point or no such thing as a line as a geometric figure. There is no figure called line. There is no figure called point, because point is location and line is itinerary, motion. That's what it is. Okay, that's how it's defined, and that's how it's used. Geometers, physicists, mathematical physicists, they have no use for objects. And that's why the word object has never been defined. You won't find a single textbook of physics on planet Earth in any country that begins with the definitions of what an object is. Okay? Why? Because they never use objects. And you would think that if you can't do physics without objects, meaning you cannot explain a mechanism without an object, then the first word you need to define is the word object, because the first principle of physics is that you can't do physics without an object. Just that simple. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, here we have the line of mathematical physics today, and it's an itinerary. It's a bunch of locations. They depict them with little points, little dots, but each one of those dots has two dimensions, because you can see it. There is no object that is one-dimensional or zero-dimensional, let alone four-dimensional. So, they have to put a dot in there to put something physical so that you can relate to it. Because what are they going to put? The word location in there? Are they going to put the word motion or displacement or itinerary? What are they going to put in there? So that's what it is. That's what the line of so-called geometry is today. It's not a geometric figure. It's just an itinerary. Okay, and why is that important? Well, because here you have Euclid's circle, which he defined in the same way, essentially. Okay, and he says in first three definitions involving the circle. So definition 15, a circle is a plane figure. No, it ain't. Not to this day, it ain't a figure, okay? But contained by one line. Remember what was a line? A bunch of points, a bunch of locations. That all the straight lines falling upon it from one point among those lines within the figure equal one another. In other words, the center point. Okay, so there you have it. That's Euclid's notion of a circle. It's just a bunch of rays going from the center to a point that makes up the line, the curved line that encapsulates what is known as a circle. Okay, and no, in fact, the geometers today, the mathematical physicists, they will clarify that the inside of the circumference, what's inside of it, is not part of the circle. They say it's the circumference which is the circle, and if you include the center part, it's called a disk. So what is the word circle for then, if all we have is circumference and disk? And then definition 16, and the point is called the center of the circle. There you see it, okay? And definition 17, a diameter of the circle is any straight line drawn through the center and terminated in both directions by the circumference of the circle. And such a straight line also bisects the circle. Okay, and you say, Bill, why do we need to know all this? I thought we were going to talk about spheres. Well, please have a little patience. I'll get there, okay? Give me a chance here. So what is a circle according to mathematical physics today? I mean, is it any different than this? It's slightly different, okay? It's the same thing, but it doesn't include all these rays, okay? And here it is. This is what it is. Okay, it looks like this. Similar, but without the rays from the center. The circle today is just an itinerary, an orbit. That's what it is. It's an orbit. And you see two definitions there, both of them pulled out of the Wikipedia. All points in a plane that are at a given distance from a given point, the center. And what's the other notion? The curve traced out by a point, meaning a location, right? That moves in a plane so that its distance from a given point is constant. In other words, it's the orbit of a location. That's what a circle is. And if it doesn't include the center, well, I don't know how it can be called a plane. All we have is really a little line, which is really not a line. It's just an itinerary. It's an orbit around the center. And that's what they call a circle. That's not a plane. Not a plane at all. And certainly not a figure, okay? Because an itinerary is not a figure. And again, you say, Bill, why do we need to know all this to know what a sphere is? Well, here it goes, okay? From there, we move on to the semicircle, okay? We need to know all these notions to know what a sphere is, okay? That's why I'm putting all this up here. Okay, here's the semicircle, okay, according to Euclid, okay? What is it? A semicircle is the figure, figure, okay, contained by the diameter and the circumference cut off by it. And the center of the semicircle is the same as that of the circle. So that's a semicircle. It's half of Euclid's circle, which includes all these rays, okay? And again, all these rays, they do not make a plane. A plane is a continuous surface. This guy is saying, no, it's a bunch of rays, a bunch of arrows, lines, whatever, and each line is an individual unit, and between any two lines there are gazillions of lines, okay, because they're not talking about lines, because they're talking about itineraries, and itineraries are made of locations, and between any two locations you can fit gazillions of locations, because it's a concept. It's not a physical object. Okay, you can't just be making the point smaller and smaller and smaller. That's not what it is. Okay, what we're talking about is locations. That's why they say that between any 2 points you can fit gazillions of points, because they're not talking about physical objects. Physical objects, you cannot fit gazillions of points between 2 points, because you just got to find out what the size of the point is, and there is only a given distance between any 2 points. You can fit only so many points in between. But when you turn the point into locations, well, you can fit as many locations as you want. And time also, you can fit as many seconds as you want between there, or gazillions of a second in between there. Okay, and what is a semicircle according to the the illustrious mathematical physics of today? Well, here it is. If I can put it up there, what happened? Something happened here. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, here it is. This is the semicircle of mathematics, again, today. And again, you can see the only thing that's missing are the rays. Okay. It says a semicircle is a one-dimensional locus of points that forms half of a circle. And another definition says a semicircle is a two-dimensional geometric shape. No, it ain't. But that forms half of a circle. And then you see what Wolfram has in two of its sites. says a semicircle is a half circle formed by cutting a whole circle along a diameter line. And another one, a little shorter, concise, half a circle. That's what it is. Okay, what is a circle? Well, it's a bunch of points. What is a point? It's a location. So we're talking about an itinerary, and that's what we have. We have half an itinerary. That was what a semicircle is. Okay, so where does this all lead to? Well, it leads to this. What is Euclid's sphere? Okay, we're talking about Euclid's sphere here, okay? Well, this is it, okay? Actually not, that's not Euclid's sphere. Let's put Euclid's sphere here. That's not the one I want to show. Let me show this one, okay? Remove this one out of there. Give me a second here. Okay, so this is Euclid's sphere, okay? He's going to take a semicircle and he's going to spin it around, okay? He says this, and he says that that's what a sphere is. He's talking about a solid here, okay? And it turns out it's like a wheel that you turn, half a wheel that you turn around. He says that's a sphere, okay? And the spokes, moving around. Says, when a semicircle with fixed diameters carried around and restored again to the same position from which it began to be moved, the figure so comprehended is a sphere. Okay? What is a sphere according to mathematical physics? Well, you can guess almost. They're going to take that same semicircle and do something with it. Okay, and here it is. Okay. Let me put it over here so you can compare them side by side. Sphere, a solid generated when a semicircle is being rotated about its diameter in three-dimensional space. This is also known as a perfect round geometrical object. No, it's not an object and it's not a figure. A sphere created by rotating a semicircle with radius a around the y-axis. Does your answer agree with the what? Volume of a sphere. Yeah, they're talking about a volume. They're talking about something else. They're not talking about what a sphere is. They're talking about the volume occupied by a sphere. Okay? They're talking about how much water the rubber ducky displaces. That's what it's all about. And then it said the region bounded by x equals 0, blah, 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 will be a semicircle which by rotating about the x-axis generates a semi-sphere whose volume is blah, 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 blah. And then we have the stack exchange again, all these PhDs, and they say, what is a sphere? Rotated half a circle in 3D. Some 3D shapes, like the sphere, are constructed by rotating a planar shape around an axis. No, that's called a volume. That's not called a sphere. Okay? A sphere is a ball. That's what a sphere is. Okay? And so, yeah, all these people, they're building all these things with itineraries. But listen what happens here. Look at this. Let me show this again. Okay? See, that semicircle is first built with it as an itinerary. Okay, those are locations. So we're talking about a bunch of locations. Okay, we build the first half circle, and then that is an itinerary. But then they're going to move the itinerary around to build a sphere. So we have the motion or the orbit or the round trip of an itinerary, of a trajectory, of an orbit, because you have half an orbit and then that orbit orbits. That's what they have. And this takes us to one of the funny things that they have out there, and you'll see why that's related all to geometry in the end, what geometry is really about. And some of you have heard of the tesseract, which is regarded to be a four-dimensional object. And here it is. Here's the analysis for that. And again, you're talking about the motion of motion. That's what a tesseract is. You also have the hypersphere as well, but let's do the hyper cube instead. You have a cube. Listen carefully here. You have a cube, and the cube expands over time. Think of it as a cubic balloon, and you inflate it. So the cube grows over time, becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay? So that with that you build that photo of a tesseract, which is what you see on the upper right hand corner there. So you have the beginning cube and the ending cube, and then the growth is shown with these lines that connect the corners. Okay? You understand that? We have the small cube, we have the ending cube, okay? The beginning and the ending cube, and their corners are, their vertices are connected by these lines which represent the motion of expansion. Okay, and there you see the tesseract. So when you look at a tesseract, that's what you're staring at. You're not staring at a cube, three-dimensional or four-dimensional cube. What you're staring at is the growth of a cube, the film of a growth of a cube growing through time, and you're seeing that film in one photograph. Okay, they condensed it, and the lines are just there to represent that motion, that growth motion. Those lines that connect the corners. Okay, that's the first part. Now we take that. Remember, this is in motion. Okay, it's growing. Okay, keep that in mind. We're having a box that's becoming bigger, right? Now they're going to turn that box, but not as it's growing. Okay, what they really do is they wait for the box to grow and then they turn it, give it a different location, a different axis, a different tilt. And then they do it again, and then they do it again, and then they do it again. So we have this box growing. You take a snapshot of that. Now you rotate it a little bit. Now you start again. You have this box growing. You take a snapshot of it, and you move it a little bit, and so on down the line. So you have the growth of a cube over time. That film turns into a photograph. Now you're going to take that last photograph, and you're going to make a movie of those, using those pictures, those frames, okay? And so we have the motion of motion. That's what a tesseract is. So let's look at this thing in motion so that you can see what you're staring at whenever you're looking at a tesseract, which is the same thing that they're doing with the semicircle, rotating it around and saying that's a sphere. Well, this is the same thing they're doing with the tesseract. And here it is, okay? You've seen the tesseract here. So what you're staring at there is the growth of the box on the inside, okay? And this is ridiculous because that's not what it is. What you see is the box is really growing, and the lines that unite the corners represent that growth, and then they move the whole thing around. So we have the motion of motion. We have a movie within a movie. Within the frame of a movie. That's what you're staring at. And then you're looking at the movie of each one of these frames. So yeah, the motion within one frame is very scary stuff. And that's what they do exactly with the hemisphere, with the semicircle. They first build this itinerary, which is a curve, and then they move the curve, that itinerary around. They say that's a sphere. We're not even talking about a figure. Okay, but that's geometry for you in a nutshell. Okay, so here are my conclusions. Okay, so that you can take this to the bank. Okay, so let's summarize here. Point is equal to a location. That's what point is in both Euclid and today, mathematical physics. What is a line? Motion. It's an itinerary. Okay, it's a bunch of locations. What is a circle? It's the orbit of a location. It's an orbit. That's what it is. It's not a figure. It's an orbit. It's something moving. What is it that's moving? A location. The location is orbiting. What's in that location? A location. No specified object. What is a semicircle? Well, that's half a circle. So it's half an orbit. And the orbit itself is just stopped. It has a starting point and an ending point, but it doesn't go all around. It just stops halfway. Okay, so that's what a semicircle is. What is a sphere? Well, they take that orbit and they orbit it around. They twirl it around. They say we're twirling the orbit, half an orbit. Okay, they could have twirled the whole circle around, but they said no. We're going to twirl half a circle. We're going to twirl the semicircle around, which is what? A semi-itinerary. That's what it is. And then what's the tesseract? Well, the same thing, but in cubic mode. They say, look, the tesseract is just the expansion of a box, okay? And they're going to freeze the beginning and ending frame, connect them with lines which represent the time, the distance traveled, okay, by the expanding cube. And then they're going to take that, make a single frame of the film with that, and then we're going to make a movie with that and twirl that around as well. Same thing for the sphere as for the tesseract. That's geometry condensed in a nutshell for you. Okay. And today I'll have to skip the questions. I've gone over my limit today. I've got something to do. And what I'll do is I'll cover those questions that people made. I have quite a few of those. I'll cover them on Wednesday. So we'll see.